I am Declan, 22 years old, and I still remember my parents' faces as they handed my twin sister Eliza an envelope containing tickets to Europe. Mom hugged her, saying, "You deserve the world." Minutes later, I opened my envelope to find a $15 coffee shop gift card and received a lecture about learning gratitude. After years of this treatment, I just smiled. But that night, I packed my laptop and left. Before I tell you how I turned this betrayal into my greatest victory, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. I promise, when you hear how my parents called me crying a week later, you'll understand why success is the best revenge. Growing up as Declan Walker alongside my twin sister Eliza never felt like we were equals. We shared the same birthday, the same last name, and technically the same opportunities, but from an early age, there was an invisible line drawn between us that I couldn't understand until I was older. Our parents came from very different worlds, but somehow created a united front when it came to favoring my sister. Dad, Robert Walker, built his reputation as a cutthroat business executive who worked his way up from middle management to vice president at a Fortune 500 company. He valued connections, appearances, and social climbing above almost everything else. Mom, Catherine Walker, was a former beauty queen who had competed in pageants across 3 states before settling down to marry Dad. She maintained her pageant-perfect appearance and expected the same flawless presentation from her children. The first time I clearly noticed the difference in how they treated us was around our 10th birthday. Eliza had asked for ballet lessons, and not only did they sign her up, but they converted our basement into a practice studio with mirrors and a bar. When I asked for a computer programming book the same week, Dad laughed and said, "What are you going to do with that? Build yourself some friends?" Mom just smiled tightly and suggested I focus more on sports instead. I can still picture our 12th birthday party vividly. For Eliza, they organized a massive celebration at the country club with 40 of her closest friends. There was a professional DJ, catered food, and even a small fireworks display at the end of the night. All her friends brought expensive gifts, and our parents gave her a gold bracelet engraved with her initials. My party was the same event, but while Eliza was the star, I was barely acknowledged. My gift from our parents was a set of dress shirts for the upcoming school year and a lecture about dressing for success. While Eliza flourished in the spotlight, I retreated to my room and discovered my passion for coding. I started with simple HTML websites, then moved to JavaScript, Python, and eventually more complex programming languages. Each small success filled me with a quiet pride that sustained me through family dinners where Eliza's latest social triumph dominated the conversation. By high school, the pattern was firmly established. Eliza was the golden child, captain of the cheerleading squad, homecoming queen, and social butterfly, with a tight circle of equally popular friends. I was the quiet, tech-oriented twin who excelled academically but barely registered on my parents' radar of accomplishments. During our junior year of high school, Eliza got a brand new car for her newly acquired driver's license. It was a sleek white BMW that our parents surprised her with, complete with a massive red bow in our driveway and a professional photographer to capture her reaction. 3 months later, when I got my license, Dad handed me the keys to his 8-year-old Honda with over 100,000 miles on it, and told me I should be grateful they were giving me a car at all. Despite the constant dismissal, I channeled my frustration into excellence. I maintained a 4.0 GPA, became president of the computer science club, and started developing my first serious app during senior year. It was a simple program designed to help students organize their study schedules, but it gained surprising popularity at our school. A local tech blog even featured it, though my parents never bothered to read the article. The real shock came during college application season. Everyone assumed Eliza would attend an elite university based on her social prominence and our family connections. When she got accepted to Westridge University, one of the top schools in the country, our parents threw a massive party and invited what felt like half the town. 2 weeks later, when my acceptance letter from the same university arrived, along with a partial academic scholarship, Dad frowned and said, "Are you sure you wouldn't be happier at the state college?" Mom added, "Westridge is so competitive, honey. We just don't want you to feel overwhelmed." Their reaction made it clear they never expected me to aim so high, let alone get accepted. That night, I made a silent promise to myself as I stared at my acceptance letter. I would go to Westridge alongside Eliza, but I would forge my own path. If my parents couldn't see my worth, I would build something so undeniable they would have no choice but to recognize it. Freshman year at Westridge University started with Eliza and me sharing a cramped dorm room that barely contained her extensive wardrobe, let alone my computer equipment. Within 3 weeks, she had pledged the most prestigious sorority on campus, Kappa Delta Sigma, and moved into their luxurious house with marble countertops and a heated pool. I remained in the dorm, secretly relieved to have the space to myself. While Eliza became a campus social fixture, I dove headfirst into the computer science program. The university's resources were incredible, with state-of-the-art labs and professors who had founded successful tech companies. For the first time, I felt like I had found my place, surrounded by people who spoke my language and valued the skills I had quietly been developing for years. The divide between us grew wider with each passing semester. Eliza's Instagram account documented her transformation into a campus celebrity, with weekend trips to beach houses owned by sorority sisters' parents, and formal events where she draped herself on the arm of whatever fraternity president or student body officer she was dating that month. Meanwhile, I was building relationships with professors and fellow tech enthusiasts who recognized potential in my ideas. Thanksgiving of sophomore year crystallized our family's dynamic perfectly. Around our parents' elaborately decorated dining table, Eliza regaled everyone with stories about being invited to the governor's son's birthday party and how her sorority had raised $10,000 for charity through their annual fashion show. My parents listened with rapt attention, asking follow-up questions and beaming with pride. When conversation finally turned to me, I mentioned making the dean's list and being invited to join an exclusive research project with Professor William Harrington, one of the most respected names in artificial intelligence development. Dad cut me off mid-sentence to ask if the cranberry sauce was homemade, and the conversation shifted to Mom's recipes. Later that night, as I helped Mom with dishes while Eliza and Dad watched football in the living room, she patted my shoulder and said, "It's good that you're doing well in your classes, Declan. Not everyone can be social like your sister, but at least you have your computer things." Her attempt at comfort only underscored how little she understood about my world or ambitions. Professor Harrington became the mentor I never had in my father. In his 60s, with wild gray hair and perpetually ink-stained fingers, he recognized something in me during an advanced programming class and invited me to stay after one day. "You have a different way of approaching problems," he told me, peering over his round spectacles. "Most students try to force existing frameworks to fit new challenges. You build from the ground up." Under his guidance, I began developing a software platform that could revolutionize how companies handled customer data integration. While most existing systems required months of expensive customization, my approach would allow businesses to implement solutions in days rather than months. Professor Harrington helped me refine the concept and introduced me to industry contacts who provided valuable feedback. Meanwhile, the financial disparity between Eliza and me became increasingly obvious. Our parents fully funded her education, sorority dues, apartment, car, and regular shopping sprees. For me, they covered basic tuition but expected me to handle everything else. Building character, Dad called it whenever I mentioned needing textbooks or new equipment. I took a job at the campus IT help desk, working evening shifts that left me exhausted but provided enough income to cover essentials. Sometimes I would catch glimpses of Eliza and her friends returning from dinner at expensive restaurants while I trudged home from my late shift, but I never mentioned these moments when we spoke. Our conversations had become increasingly superficial anyway, limited to holiday gatherings and the occasional text exchange. During junior year, I found my tribe. Jordan Fisher was a brilliant systems architect who lived on energy drinks and philosophical debates about open-source software. Alex Rivera was a former hacker with an uncanny ability to spot security vulnerabilities before they became problems. We met in an advanced programming seminar and quickly formed a bond based on shared ambition and complementary skills. Late one night, Fueled by caffeine and ambition, I shared my software concept with them. Instead of the polite nods I usually received when explaining my work to others, they immediately grasped the potential. "This could change everything about enterprise integration," Jordan said, scribbling notes furiously. "If you can make this scalable, every major corporation will want it." That was the night my vague concept transformed into a genuine business opportunity. Together, we refined the architecture, addressed potential scaling issues, and mapped out development milestones. For the first time, I began to see beyond graduation to a future where my work, not my sister's social connections, would define my worth. As senior year approached, my emotional connection to my family had withered to a fragile thread. Phone calls home became briefer and less frequent. I made excuses to stay at school during shorter breaks, claiming project deadlines or work commitments. The truth was simpler. I had found acceptance among people who valued me for my mind and potential, not my sister's reflected glow. Senior year arrived with a momentum that surprised even me. What had begun as a conceptual project in Professor Harrington's lab was evolving into a viable product that attracted attention from several industry insiders. Jordan, Alex, and I had spent the summer coding until our fingers cramped, fueled by ramen noodles and the exhilaration of building something genuinely innovative. By October, word had spread through Westridge's well-connected technology department about our project. A mid-sized software company sent representatives to see a demonstration, and though they tried to maintain poker faces, I caught their excited whispers as they left. 2 weeks later, they called with an offer to purchase our platform outright for $75,000. We declined. It wasn't arrogance that drove our decision, but a growing confidence that what we were building could be worth exponentially more. Professor Harrington connected us with Thomas Warren, an angel investor known for backing early-stage tech companies with disruptive potential. Our first meeting with Warren took place at an upscale coffee shop near campus. I arrived 30 minutes early, rehearsing my presentation points while nervously adjusting my only decent button-down shirt. Warren turned out to be younger than I expected, maybe 40, with shrewd eyes that evaluated everything and an intensity that was both intimidating and inspiring. "Show me why I should care about your software when there are 50 other integration platforms already on the market," he challenged before I had even finished setting up my laptop. 3 hours later, we were still talking. Warren canceled his next 2 appointments as we dove deep into technical specifications, market differentiation, and scaling strategies. By the end of our marathon session, he was sketching potential growth models on napkins and asking pointed questions about our long-term vision. "You need to think bigger," he told me as we finally prepared to leave. "This isn't just a better mousetrap. This could redefine how enterprises approach data integration entirely." He handed me his card with his personal cell number scrawled on the back. "Refine the prototype. We'll talk again after the holidays." Meanwhile, Eliza was facing the unfamiliar sensation of uncertainty. For the first time in her life, her social prominence didn't translate into clear next steps. Many of her sorority sisters had secured prestigious jobs through family connections or were engaged to promising young men from wealthy families. Eliza had plenty of options but no clear direction. I occasionally overheard her phone conversations with our parents, full of anxiety about her future and their reassurances that everything will work out perfectly for someone like you. Those same conversations never included questions about my plans or prospects. Christmas break that year brought the pattern into sharp relief again. We gathered at our childhood home, now decorated with even more extravagance as Dad's corporate success had continued to grow. On Christmas morning, Eliza unwrapped a sleek new car to replace her college BMW, which apparently had become embarrassingly outdated after just 4 years. My gift was a set of winter clothes, practical items Mom had selected because you never dress warmly enough, and we worry about you getting sick before graduation. The disparity wasn't surprising anymore, but something had changed within me. Rather than the familiar sting of disappointment, I felt a strange detachment, as though I was observing a family dynamic that no longer had the power to wound me. That night, while everyone else slept, I sat in our darkened living room with my laptop, putting the finishing touches on the prototype that Thomas Warren would evaluate in January. The Christmas tree lights cast multicolored shadows across my keyboard as I worked, and I realized I felt more connection to the code on my screen than to the family photos arranged on the mantel above the fireplace. Back at school for our final semester, everything accelerated. Warren reviewed our updated prototype and called me the next day. "I'm in. $500,000 in seed funding to get this off the ground properly. We can discuss terms next week." The validation was overwhelming, but I kept the news to myself, not ready to share it with anyone beyond our small team and Professor Harrington. As graduation approached, I overheard a phone conversation between my parents and Eliza about her graduation gift. Dad mentioned something about the full European experience and first class all the way, while Mom chimed in about having professional photographers document the trip for her social media. I quietly closed the door to my room and returned to coding, pushing aside the flicker of hope that they might have planned something meaningful for me as well. Despite everything, some small, persistent part of me still longed for their recognition. Maybe graduation, with its tangible evidence of my academic success, would finally bridge the gap between us. Maybe they would finally see me clearly. I prepared for independence regardless. I secured a small apartment near the business district of the city, arranged to start our company operations immediately after graduation, and mapped out a product development timeline with Jordan and Alex. If parental approval came, it would be welcome. If not, I was building a life that didn't require it. Graduation morning dawned with a perfect blue sky that seemed to promise new beginnings. I woke early, the anticipation making sleep impossible. After 4 years of relentless work, countless all-nighters, and the gradual transformation from overlooked twin to promising entrepreneur, this day represented a threshold between my past and future. The residence hall buzzed with activity as families arrived, helping graduates pack final belongings and taking photos to commemorate the occasion. I dressed carefully in the new suit I had purchased, specifically for this day, a significant expense from my limited budget, but one that felt important. The charcoal gray material and subtle blue tie projected exactly the image I wanted. Confident, professional, ready for the business world I was about to enter. My parents and Eliza arrived at 10:30, Dad parking their luxury SUV in the visitor lot and immediately checking his watch. Mom looked impeccable as always in a designer dress and heels that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Eliza wore a sundress that complemented her graduation gown perfectly, clearly chosen with Instagram aesthetics in mind. "Oh, Declan, couldn't you have gotten a haircut?" were Mom's first words as she air-kissed my cheek. Dad gave me a firm handshake and a cursory glance before launching into a story about meeting the university president at a charity gala last year. We walked to the ceremony venue together, Mom and Eliza chatting animatedly about graduation outfits they had spotted, Dad fielding business calls despite the occasion. I felt simultaneously part of this family unit and completely separate from it, like a satellite maintaining orbit around planets that generated no gravitational pull. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of speeches about future potential and changing the world. When my name was called, I crossed the stage to receive my diploma with highest honors in computer science and business administration. From the audience, I could see Jordan and Alex cheering wildly, Professor Harrington applauding with genuine pride. My parents offered polite smiles and perfunctory claps, already glancing at the program to calculate how much longer the ceremony would last. Afterward, Dad insisted on taking us to Lancaster's, the most expensive restaurant in town, where he had secured reservations weeks in advance. "Nothing but the best for our graduates," he announced loudly enough for nearby families to hear. The maitre d' recognized him immediately and escorted us to a prime table overlooking the river. Throughout the meal, conversation revolved around Eliza's accomplishments, her popularity at school, and the many doors that would undoubtedly open for her. Mom described how 3 different mothers from their country club had already inquired about setting up interviews for Eliza at their husbands' companies. "And what about you, Declan?" Dad finally asked as dessert arrived. "Have you given any thought to what comes next?" I could make a call to human resources at my firm. They always need people to manage the technology department. Before I could answer, Mom chimed in. "That would be perfect. Regular hours, good benefits, a respectable career path." The way she emphasized respectable made it clear what she thought of my entrepreneurial ambitions on the few occasions I had tried to share them. "Actually, I have plans," I began, but Eliza interrupted with a dramatic gasp. Is it time for gifts? I cannot wait another second. Her performance was perfectly calibrated for maximum attention, a skill she had refined over 22 years of being the family spotlight. Dad smiled indulgently and produced 2 envelopes from his jacket pocket. One was thick, cream-colored stationery, with Eliza's name calligraphed on the front. The other was a standard business envelope with my name written in ballpoint pen. "Ladies first," he said, handing Eliza her envelope with a flourish. She opened it with practiced excitement, gasping again as she removed several glossy brochures and documents. First-class tickets to Europe? A 3-month grand tour with luxury accommodations in every city? Private guided tours of the Louvre, the Vatican, and Buckingham Palace? Her voice rose with each revelation. My own professional photographer for the entire trip to document everything for my social platforms? Mom reached across the table to squeeze Eliza's hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "You deserve the world, darling. This trip will give you the cultural polish and connections that will set you apart in whatever career you choose." Dad nodded solemnly. "Consider it an investment in your future. The people you'll meet, the experiences you'll have, they're priceless. When you return, doors will open that others can't even see." The restaurant seemed to contract around me as I watched this familiar scene play out. The excessive gift, the emotional validation, the framing of luxury as necessity. I had witnessed variations of this moment throughout our lives, but something about this particular instance, on this day of supposed equal accomplishment, struck deeper than usual. Dad slid the second envelope across the table toward me. "Your turn, son." I opened it slowly, already knowing whatever was inside would pale in comparison. The envelope contained a gift card to Scholar's Brew, the coffee shop near campus where I often worked late into the night, and a handwritten note in Dad's precise script. The gift card was for $15. The note read, "Congratulations on your graduation. Remember that in the real world, success comes to those who understand the value of hard work and gratitude. This is the beginning of your journey towards self-sufficiency." I stared at these items for several seconds, trying to process not just the insultingly small monetary value, but the breathtaking lack of thought, effort, or emotional investment they represented. "Well," Mom prompted, "isn't that thoughtful? Your father knows how much time you spend in coffee shops with your computer." Dad leaned forward, entering lecture mode. "Declan, as you enter the professional world, it's important you learn gratitude for the opportunities presented to you. Eliza understands the importance of social grace and appreciation. Her trip will enhance qualities she already possesses. You need to develop these fundamentals before you can expect more." I looked around the table at my family. Dad, self-satisfied and oblivious. Mom, nodding along with his wisdom. Eliza, already scrolling through Instagram to share news of her extravagant gift, barely paying attention to my reaction. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about unequal gift values or ongoing favoritism. It was about a fundamental misunderstanding of who I was and what I had accomplished. It was about the recognition that this dynamic would never change unless I changed it myself. I smiled, tucked the gift card into my wallet, and thanked them politely. "It's perfect," I said, surprising even myself with how calm I sounded. Exactly what I needed. For the remainder of the meal, I participated in conversation with unusual engagement, asking Eliza about her travel plans and complimenting Mom on her earrings. If my family noticed anything unusual about my sudden sociability, they gave no indication. When the check arrived, Dad paid with his platinum card and suggested we all return home for a small celebration with champagne. As we exited the restaurant, I declined the offer of a ride in their car, explaining I needed to drop off some books at the library. "I'll meet you at home in an hour," I promised, already knowing it was a promise I had no intention of keeping. I drove back to campus one last time, parking near my residence hall and sitting in silence for several minutes. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quad where just hours earlier I had officially completed my university education. 4 years of growth, discovery, and quiet determination had led to this pivotal moment. In my room, I began methodically packing the essentials. My laptop, external hard drives containing all my code and project files, and the prototype demonstrations we had developed for potential investors. I took only the clothes I would need immediately, my important documents, and a few personal items that held genuine meaning. As I packed, memories from throughout my life played like a slideshow in my mind. My 10th birthday, when Dad forgot to get me a gift but came home with an expensive bracelet for Eliza because he had seen it while shopping for clients. The high school science fair where I won first place, only to have my parents skip the awards ceremony because Eliza had a minor role in the school play the same evening. Countless dinners where my achievements went unacknowledged, while Eliza's smallest accomplishments were celebrated extravagantly. The pattern was so consistent, so unyielding, that continuing to hope for change had become its own form of self-betrayal. The $15 gift card wasn't the cause of my decision to leave, but the final confirmation that nothing would ever shift unless I forced it to. I gathered the last of my belongings, surprisingly few for someone who had lived 2 decades with the same family. My entire life fit into 3 duffel bags and a backpack. Before leaving, I wrote a simple note on the university stationery I had received at freshman orientation 4 years earlier. Thank you for making this decision easy. No signature was necessary. I placed the note on my meticulously made bed, took one final look around the room that had housed my transformation from overlooked son to emerging entrepreneur, and closed the door behind me. Outside, I called Jordan. He answered on the first ring. "How was the graduation lunch?" he asked, his voice cautious. Jordan knew enough about my family dynamics to understand why I might need support today. "About as expected," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Is that spare room still available at your place?" There was only the briefest pause before he responded. "Of course, for as long as you need it. Do you want me to come help you move your stuff?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. As I drove away from campus, I passed the turn that would lead to my childhood home. Through the windshield, I could see my parents' house on the hill, lights glowing warmly in the growing dusk. I imagined them inside, champagne already flowing as Eliza showed Mom websites of European destinations she would visit. Dad was probably making calls to business associates, bragging about his daughter's grand tour. For a moment, I felt a sharp pang of grief for the relationship we never had, the approval I never received, the connection I had spent years trying to establish. Then I accelerated past the turn, watching in my rearview mirror as the house grew smaller and finally disappeared from view. Jordan's apartment was in a converted warehouse downtown, a spacious industrial loft he shared with 2 other tech graduates. He met me at the entrance, took one of my bags without comment, and led me up 3 flights of stairs to a modest but clean room with exposed brick walls and large windows overlooking the city. "Home sweet home," he said, setting down my bag. "At least until we get proper offices and you find your own place." Later that night, after declining his roommate's offers of welcome beers and sympathy, I sat cross-legged on the borrowed mattress, with my laptop open before me. The screen glowed with the code that represented my future, lines of possibility stretching toward a horizon I was only beginning to envision. I opened my email and composed a message to Thomas Warren, ready to accelerate our timeline. "Can meet tomorrow to discuss next steps and formalize funding arrangement. The future starts now." His reply came within minutes. "Breakfast, 8 a.m. Kingsley Hotel. Bring your A-game and that brilliant mind of yours." I closed my laptop and lay back on the unfamiliar bed, feeling an unexpected sense of lightness. The weight of unmet expectations and constant comparison had lifted, replaced by the clean, clear freedom of charting my own course. For the first time in my life, every decision, every success, and every failure would be entirely my own. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Eliza, each growing more concerned as the evening progressed. "Where are you?" "Mom and Dad are waiting with champagne." "Declan, seriously, call me. They're getting worried. This isn't funny. Did something happen? Please just let me know you're okay." I turned off the phone and placed it in the drawer of the bedside table. Tomorrow would be soon enough to deal with the fallout. Tonight belonged to me alone. The first week of independence passed in a blur of activity and purpose. Jordan's spare room became my temporary home base, a Spartan but functional space where I slept on a mattress on the floor and woke each morning with a clarity I had never experienced living under my parents' roof. My meeting with Thomas Warren, exceeded all expectations. Over breakfast at the Kingsley Hotel's upscale restaurant, we formalized our agreement: $500,000 in seed funding in exchange for 20% equity in the company. The funds would be transferred within 48 hours, allowing us to secure office space, purchase necessary equipment, and hire additional developers to accelerate our timeline. "This is an investment in you as much as your technology," Warren told me as we shook hands to seal the deal. "I've backed dozens of startups, and the difference between success and failure rarely comes down to the initial idea. It's about the founder's resilience and adaptability." He looked me directly in the eyes, his expression serious. "You've got something most young entrepreneurs lack. You've already learned to succeed without external validation. That's invaluable." His words resonated with me on a level I wasn't prepared for. What I had always seen as my greatest disadvantage, the lack of parental support and recognition, might actually have forged the very qualities that would drive my success. By the end of the week, we had leased a small but prestigious office space in the emerging tech district downtown. The space featured open-concept workstations, 2 conference rooms, and large windows that flooded the area with natural light. Standing in the empty space before our furniture arrived, I felt a surge of ownership and possibility that no amount of parental approval could have provided. Jordan and Alex officially joined as co-founders, each bringing complementary skills to our fledgling enterprise. We hired 2 additional developers, both recent graduates with impressive portfolios and the hungry, ambitious energy we needed. Our small team gathered around folding tables with our laptops, working 14-hour days fueled by delivery pizza and the intoxicating momentum of building something from nothing. Throughout this period, my phone continued to accumulate messages from Eliza, each more urgent than the last. My parents, surprisingly, didn't call once during the first 3 days, apparently assuming I was being dramatic and would return when I came to my senses. When they finally did start calling, I let their attempts go to voicemail, not yet ready to engage with the inevitable guilt trips and misunderstandings. Eliza's messages took a different tone from our parents. Between expressions of concern and confusion, I detected genuine worry and perhaps even remorse. On the 5th day after graduation, I finally sent her a brief text: "I'm safe, need space, focus on your trip." Her immediate response came as a flurry of questions and pleas to talk, but I returned to my work, immersing myself in code and business development rather than family dynamics. The company needed my full attention, and for once in my life, my priorities would come first. We named our company Nexus Integration Systems, reflecting our software's ability to serve as the central connection point for disparate corporate data systems. I worked with a graphic designer to create our logo and brand identity, insisting on clean, professional aesthetics that would appeal to enterprise clients. By the end of our 2nd week, our office had transformed from an empty shell to a functioning headquarters with proper workstations, meeting areas, and even a small kitchen stocked with essentials. The work itself provided a satisfaction I had never experienced before. Every line of code, every product feature, every business decision represented a direct extension of my vision and abilities. There were no parents to impress, no sister to compete with, just the pure meritocracy of building something valuable and seeing it recognized as such. Our first major breakthrough came almost accidentally. While refining our database integration module, I discovered a method to process legacy system data 40% faster than any existing solution on the market. What began as a technical footnote quickly became our primary selling point when demonstrations consistently showed dramatic performance improvements over established competitors. A prominent tech blog got wind of our innovation through Professor Harrington's academic connections and requested an interview. The resulting article, titled Nexus Integration: The Startup Redefining Enterprise Data Management, generated immediate industry buzz. Within days, our website traffic increased tenfold, and inquiries from potential clients and additional investors began flooding in. The first time I saw my name in print, described as a visionary young CEO and emerging leader in enterprise software, I felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in the recognition, certainly, but also a lingering sadness that my family wasn't sharing in this moment. Despite everything, Some childlike part of me still wanted to show them the article, still hoped for their approval and pride. Instead, I channeled that energy into securing our first major client. Global Financial Partners, a mid-sized investment firm with offices in 3 states, had been struggling with data integration issues for months. Their chief technology officer reached out after reading the tech blog article, and within 2 weeks, we had signed a $75,000 contract to implement our solution across their entire organization. The day we signed the contract, I moved out of Jordan's spare room and into my own apartment in a modern building downtown. The space was modest, 1 bedroom with an open kitchen and living area, but it represented another step toward full independence. I furnished it sparsely but intentionally, selecting a few quality pieces that reflected my personal taste rather than my parents' ideas of appropriate decor. That night, standing at my floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights, I felt an unfamiliar sensation washing over me. It took several moments to identify it: contentment. Not happiness exactly, which seemed too simple a word, but a deep, settled confidence in my path and purpose. For 22 years, I had measured my worth through my parents' eyes and found it wanting. Now, I was writing my own metrics for success. My phone buzzed with a notification. An email from Eliza. I postponed the Europe trip. This doesn't feel right without resolving things with you first. I never realized how much they favored me until seeing your empty room and that note. I'm so sorry, Declan. Please talk to me when you're ready. I miss my brother. I didn't respond immediately, but for the first time since graduation, I felt open to the possibility of reconnection, at least with my sister. Perhaps distance was creating space for new understanding on both sides. Exactly 1 week after graduation, my parents finally called. Not just once, but 17 times in succession, their names flashing on my phone screen with increasing urgency. On the 18th attempt, I answered. Declan James Walker. My father's voice carried the same authoritative tone he used in board meetings. This childish disappearing act ends now. Your mother is beside herself with worry. I sat at my desk in our new company headquarters, looking out at my small team working diligently on the project that was rapidly becoming our future. This isn't a disappearing act, Dad. This is me starting my life on my terms. By running away? By leaving a cryptic note that sent your mother into hysterics? Is this about the graduation gift? For God's sake, if you wanted a vacation too, you could have just said something. The stunning lack of self-awareness in his statement momentarily left me speechless. In the background, I could hear my mother's voice rising in distress, demanding he put the phone on speaker. Declan, honey, she began, her voice wavering between anger and tears. We've been worried sick. The police won't even file a missing persons report because you're an adult. Is this really about your sister's trip? You know we would have included you if you had shown any interest in culture or travel. This isn't about the trip, I said quietly, or the $15 gift card, though that was certainly symbolic. This is about 22 years of being treated as an afterthought in my own family. That's ridiculous, Dad interjected. We've given you every advantage, paid for your education. Half my education, I corrected. I worked through college while Eliza had everything covered, including her apartment and car. Well, she had additional social obligations that... Robert, stop, Mom interrupted, surprising both of us. Her voice had shifted to something more contemplative. Declan, where are you? Are you safe? Can we see you? I'm safe. I've started a company with the technology I've been developing throughout college. We just secured our first major client and significant investment funding. The silence that followed was telling. They had no frame of reference for this information, no context for understanding the son who had been building a future completely outside their awareness. A company? Dad finally managed. What are you talking about? Nexus Integration Systems. We're developing enterprise software solutions for data integration across legacy platforms. Thomas Warren provided seed funding of $500,000 in exchange for 20% equity. I heard my father's sharp intake of breath. Thomas Warren's name carried significant weight in business circles, and the investment amount I had casually mentioned represented more validation than any parental approval could have provided. "Why didn't you tell us about any of this?" Mom asked, her voice smaller now. I tried, multiple times, but there was always something more important happening with Eliza. Another silence, longer this time. "We'd like to see you," Dad finally said, his typical commanding tone replaced by something almost conciliatory. "Perhaps dinner this weekend?" "I'm afraid I'm too busy establishing our operations right now," I replied, surprised at how easily I could decline their invitation without the usual accompanying guilt. "Maybe in a few weeks, once things settle down." After ending the call, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the subtle shift that had occurred. For the first time in our relationship, I had set the terms of our interaction. The power dynamic had irrevocably changed. News of my company's formation and funding spread quickly through my parents' social circle. Thomas Warren apparently mentioned it at a charity gala, speaking highly of the brilliant young innovator he had backed. Suddenly, my parents found themselves fielding questions about their son's entrepreneurial venture from the same friends who had previously only asked about Eliza's accomplishments. 2 weeks after our phone conversation, Eliza appeared at our office unannounced. I was in a meeting with our development team when the receptionist informed me my sister was waiting in the lobby. I found her standing awkwardly by the sleek welcome desk, looking simultaneously out of place and eerily familiar. "I canceled my trip," she said immediately. "I couldn't go knowing what happened." I led her to a small conference room where we could talk privately. Up close, I could see the toll recent events had taken on her. The perpetual confidence that had always defined her seemed diminished, replaced by an uncertainty I had never associated with my twin. "Why did you never say anything?" she asked once we were seated. "About how they treated you compared to me. Would it have made a difference?" She looked down at her perfectly manicured hands. "I don't know. Maybe not to them, but to me it might have. I always knew they favored me, but I never realized how extreme it was until I saw that gift card and your empty room." She met my eyes directly. "I benefited from their favoritism my entire life, without questioning it. That makes me complicit." Her self-awareness surprised me. The Eliza I knew had always accepted preferential treatment as her natural due. "We were both just playing the roles they assigned us," I said finally. "You as the golden child, me as the afterthought. But look at what you've built while I was busy being their showpiece." She gestured around at the modern office space. "You have actual accomplishments, Declan." "I have Instagram followers and a cancelled European vacation." Over the next hour, we talked more honestly than we had in years, perhaps ever. She described the pressure of being the favorite, the impossible standards our parents set for her social success, and her growing anxiety about finding purpose beyond being Robert and Catherine Walker's perfect daughter. "I don't know who I am without their approval," she admitted. "You figured that out somehow. You built an identity separate from their expectations. Out of necessity," I reminded her. "When approval isn't available, you stop seeking it." When she left, we had reached a fragile understanding. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement of our shared experiences from different sides of the same dysfunctional dynamic. She promised to give me space, but hoped we could rebuild our relationship as equals rather than competitors in our parents' unbalanced affections. The following weeks brought remarkable developments for Nexus Integration Systems. Our software platform officially launched to positive industry reviews. 2 additional clients signed contracts, bringing our projected first-year revenue to just under $400,000. We expanded our team to include a dedicated sales representative and a client success manager. Throughout this period, I maintained minimal contact with my parents, responding to texts with brief, factual updates, but declining their increasingly insistent dinner invitations. I needed to establish firm boundaries before attempting any reconciliation. Nearly a month after graduation, they showed up unannounced at our office. I was reviewing code with our development team when Jordan appeared at the door, his expression conveying everything I needed to know. "Your parents are here," he confirmed unnecessarily. Reception called up. "I can tell them you're in meetings all day if you want." I considered the offer for a moment before shaking my head. "No, it's time. Thanks." I found them waiting in our main conference room, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the sleek, modern furnishings. Dad wore a business suit that suddenly seemed overly formal in our casual tech environment. Mom had clearly spent considerable time on her appearance, her makeup and hair perfect as always. "This is quite impressive," Dad began awkwardly, gesturing around at the office space. "Very professional." "Thank you," I replied, remaining standing rather than taking a seat. "What brings you here today?" Mom stepped forward, her rehearsed speech evident in her overly controlled tone. "Declan, we've come to apologize. The way we handled your graduation, the disparity in gifts, it was thoughtless and hurtful. We'd like to make it right." Dad nodded, reaching into his jacket to retrieve his checkbook. "We've discussed it, and we'd like to offer you the equivalent value of Eliza's trip, nearly $30,000, which you can use however you see fit." I looked at the checkbook in his hand, the absurdity of the gesture almost laughable. They still didn't understand. "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" Dad's frustration broke through his carefully controlled facade. "A trip? A car? What will it take to fix this?" "It's not about material things," I explained, keeping my voice calm despite the emotion building inside me. "It's about 22 years of being treated as less valuable, less worthy of attention and investment than Eliza. It's about never hearing, 'You deserve the world,' directed at me. Not once." "That's not fair," Dad began, but Mom placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Let him speak, Robert. We came to listen, remember?" I took a deep breath, organizing thoughts I had carried for decades but never articulated. "From the time we were children, you established a pattern. Eliza was the star, the one whose accomplishments mattered. I was the extra, the one whose achievements barely registered. Do you know what it's like to make the dean's list and have the conversation immediately shift to Eliza's sorority fundraiser?" Mom's eyes filled with tears. "We never meant to make you feel less important, but you did. Consistently, persistently, year after year. The $15 gift card versus a luxury European tour was just the culmination of a lifetime pattern." Dad's expression hardened, his default response to emotional confrontation. "So, you decided to punish us by disappearing and starting this computer business without even telling us?" "This computer business will generate nearly $500,000 in revenue this year," I countered. "I tried to tell you about it many times. You weren't interested. And I didn't leave to punish you. I left to save myself." Something in my phrasing seemed to finally break through Dad's defensive armor. He sat heavily in one of our conference room chairs, suddenly looking older than his 57 years. "I never saw it," he said quietly. "I genuinely never saw what we were doing." Mom moved beside him, her hand on his shoulder, but her eyes remained on me. "Can we start again, Declan? Can we try to be the parents you deserved all along?" I considered their question carefully. The hurt they had inflicted wasn't something that could be erased with a single conversation or apology. Yet their presence here, their willingness to listen rather than dictate terms, represented a shift I hadn't thought possible. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But we can try moving forward differently. It will take time, and real change, not just words or gestures." They left without the neat resolution they had clearly hoped for, but with the beginning of understanding. I had set boundaries and spoken my truth, perhaps for the first time in our relationship. Whether they could adapt to a new dynamic remained to be seen, but I no longer needed their adaptation for my own well-being. 6 months after graduation, we gathered for a family dinner at a restaurant of my choosing, a casual bistro with excellent food and none of the pretension my parents typically favored. Eliza had returned from a scaled-back European trip, having ultimately decided to go for 1 month instead of 3. The experience had shifted something in her as well. She spoke of architecture and history with genuine interest rather than social media opportunities. Throughout the meal, I noticed my parents making conscious efforts to engage with my work, asking thoughtful questions about our company's progress and technical challenges. Dad, particularly, seemed to have developed a newfound respect for the business acumen I had demonstrated, occasionally asking for my opinion on market trends or investment opportunities. The change wasn't perfect or complete. Old patterns occasionally emerged, quickly corrected by awkward silences or gentle redirections, but the effort itself represented a foundation we might build upon. 1 year after graduation, Nexus Integration Systems had expanded to a staff of 15, with clients in 3 countries and annual revenue approaching $2 million. Thomas Warren's initial investment had been supplemented by a second round of funding that valued the company at $12 million. The technology publication that had first featured us now listed me among 30 under 30 innovators transforming enterprise software. My relationship with my family had reached a state of cautious equilibrium. We maintained regular contact without the enmeshment that had characterized our earlier dynamic. My parents had slowly earned limited places in my life through consistent respect for boundaries and genuine interest in my work. Eliza and I had rediscovered some of the connection we had shared as young children, before parental favoritism had transformed us into unwitting competitors. The $15 gift card remained in my wallet, unused, not as a reminder of hurt or rejection, but as a marker of the moment I chose myself, the catalyst that launched me toward authentic success and self-validation. What my parents had intended as a lesson in gratitude had indeed taught me to be grateful, though not in the way they had intended. I learned to be grateful for my own resilience, for the friends who became my chosen family, for the mentor who recognized potential my parents had overlooked, and for the courage to walk away from patterns that diminished rather than nurtured me. The greatest revelation wasn't that success is the best revenge, as I once believed. It's that success built on self-respect and authentic purpose isn't revenge at all, but liberation. The ultimate gift wasn't proving my worth to those who had undervalued me, but discovering that their valuation had never defined my true worth at all. If you're watching this and struggling with family dynamics that make you feel smaller than your potential, remember that your value isn't determined by those who fail to see it. The validation you seek externally can only be temporarily satisfying until you learn to validate yourself from within. Have you ever had to walk away from relationships that diminished you in order to grow? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the best family is the one we build for ourselves. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives you courage for yours.